Okay, here we are. Part 2. This is session 25. All right. Chapter 4, the illusions of the ego. All right. Section 1, right teaching and right learning. And this is part 2 of the first section. All right. We're going to begin with paragraph 5. All right. We left off where Jesus tells us very, very powerfully. It's just wonderful. He says, I will correct your thought system if you invite me in. All right? Open it to me. I will correct it very gently and lead you back to God. Okay. Paragraph 5. Every good teacher hopes to give his students so much of his own learning that they will one day no longer need him. This is the one true goal of the teacher. It is impossible to convince the ego of this because it goes against all of its own laws. But remember that laws are set up to protect the continuity of the system in which the lawmaker believes. It is natural for the ego to try to protect itself once you have made it, but it is not natural for you to want to obey its laws unless you believe them. The ego cannot make this choice because of the nature of its origin. You can, because of the nature of yours. So he begins by telling us every good teacher realizes, right, that I'm going to give everything to the students so they don't need me. They can go off on their own. All right? The image that comes up for me is my father teaching me how to ride a two-wheeler. All right? He wanted to teach me so that eventually I didn't need him to walk behind me or run behind me, maintaining the balance of the bicycle. I eventually learned that on my own. All right? And his objective was to teach me until he wasn't necessary. I mean, that's seems to be a silly little scenario, but think about it. And oh, by the way, the first time I went down the block by myself, I crashed into the mailman. But I got better after that. I swear. And I'll never forget that. It was so many years ago, I never forgot that. My goodness. My goodness. I'll bet that was well over 65 years ago. And that memory still hangs out. Okay? But he says every good teacher hopes to give his students so much of his own learning that they will one day no longer need him. This is the one true goal of the teacher, right? And this is Jesus' goal, right? He's going to give us so much that we become like him, right? And we don't need the teaching anymore. We have become the teaching. You are that, as Gangaji would say, right? So it's impossible to convince the ego of this, right? Because it goes against all of its own laws, right? But remember that laws are set up to protect the continuity of the system in which the lawmaker believes. All right? It is natural for the ego to try to protect itself once you have made it. All right, so the ego, instead of being a good teacher, just keeps telling you, you need me to show you the way. Right? You need me to help you out of all these situations. All right? Granted, my choosing the ego made up the situations. Now the ego says, all right, help you get out of there. So we have ego solutions that only lead to more ego situations. So it perpetuates itself, all right? So it's set up to protect the continuity of the system, right? It's natural for the ego to try to protect itself once you have made it. He says, but it is not natural for you to want to obey its laws unless you believe them. Right? Right? And think about what we said in the last session, and we'll probably say it again, several times before we get through this text, that when Jesus is saying you, and this is italicized in this section, he's talking to that part of the mind that makes decisions, that chooses every moment of every minute, that chooses between fear and love, separation and oneness. Right? And he says, it's not natural for you to want to obey the laws of the ego unless you believe them, unless you believe entirely that you're separated from your source. You're totally on your own. You're an individual. And now there are others. There is duality. And that duality keeps separating. Right? There are so many others. And now I have to evaluate things. I have to judge. I have to protect myself. I have to defend myself. And it goes on and on. On and on in repetition, as the last section said. All right? But it's not natural for me as spirit to believe them, unless to obey those laws, unless I believe them. All right? So unless I believe in separation, right, I'm not subject to the rules of the ego. The ego cannot make this choice because of the nature of its origin. Right? So the ego can't choose between anything because it was born from a choice to believe I was separate. All right? But he says, but you can make the choice because of the nature of your origin. Your origin is as a thought in the mind of God. All right? You were just an extension of the source of everything. Right? Or as my wonderful wife likes to put it, you were part of the flow. Right? The original source is the origin of the flow. Right? And we are part of that. That is our origin. Right? And so he says, because of that, you can make a choice. You can always make a choice what you're going to believe. Okay? Paragraph 6, page 54. Egos can clash in any situation, but spirit cannot clash at all. If you perceive a teacher as merely a larger ego, you will be afraid. Because to enlarge an ego would be to increase anxiety about separation. I will teach with you and live with you if you will think with me. But my goal will always be to absolve you, finally, from the need for a teacher. Okay? He says, I will teach you. I will teach with you and live with you if you will think with me. All right? Align my thoughts, right, with that holy instant. Go to the right mind. Ask for reinterpretation of what my ego is showing me. Right? That's thinking with Jesus. Asking him, what does love look like in this situation? How is love reflected? How is oneness reflected? In all those words, kindness, generosity. Right? How does that show up in this situation? Right? And if Jesus was presented as just a larger ego, all right, as someone better than you, someone, he's the chosen one, He's the original and only Son of God. If he shows up as a bigger ego, we'll be afraid of him. He's going to notice I made a mistake. He's going to get me. All right? So, it will only increase anxiety about separation. All right? He says, my goal will always be to absolve you finally from the need for a teacher. All right? You won't need a teacher after that. This is the opposite of the ego-oriented teacher's goal. He is concerned with the effect of his ego on other egos, and therefore interprets their interaction as a means of ego preservation. I would not be able to devote myself to teaching if I believed this, and you will not be a devoted teacher as long as you believe it. I am constantly being perceived as a teacher, either to be exalted or rejected, but I do not accept either perception for myself. Right? And Jesus tells us, look, there's a lot of projection that goes on with the idea of Jesus. Okay? And there's a lot of baggage that comes with that, and especially in the Western world. I mean, all over the world, where people go to pound it into you, you know. So there's a lot of misconceptions about Jesus. He says, I'm constantly being perceived as a teacher either to be exalted or rejected. You know, forget him. You know, those nuns beat the hell out of me. Or I asked him for this and that and he'd never give it to me. Right? Or to be afraid. Right? You know, be afraid of approaching Jesus because he's the Son of God. He's going to keep telling us, I'm like you. I'm like you. Just listen to me. You'll see. He says, there's nothing that I do that you can't do. Right? There's nothing that you can learn that I haven't learned. Right? There's nothing that I have that you can't have. Right? Except that he says that I don't have anything else. I am what I am, as Popeye would say. He says, try not to get involved in these ego projections of who I am. All right? He says, I'm not, he says, the opposite of the ego-oriented teacher's goal. He says, my goal is to absolve you from the need for a teacher. I'm not concerned with the effect of my teaching on your, my ego on your ego. This is not the way it works. All right? And he reinforces this idea in paragraph 7. He goes, your worth is not established by teaching or learning. All right? Your worth is established by God. End of story. Your worth was established when God expanded. When God expanded, and there you were. Your worth was established. All right? Your worth is established by God. As long as you dispute this, everything you do will be fearful, particularly any situation that lends itself to the belief in superiority and inferiority. So as long as you dispute that you are created in the likeness of God, as long as you dispute that, right, everything will be fearful. Right? Just another way of saying, once you believe you've separated from that, from what you truly are, you will be fearful. Everything will be fearful. Particularly any situation that lends itself to the belief in superiority and inferiority. Right? Teachers must be patient and repeat their lessons until they are learned. I am willing to do this because I have no right to set your learning limits. So I have no right to set your learning limits for you. Again, nothing you do or think or wish or make is necessary to establish your worth. Later on in the book, there will be a section called I Need Do Nothing. Okay? And I heard in one of Dr. Wapnick's lectures that was basically at first that was a private message to Helen, who was in a state of fear at the time. And he's reminding her, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything because your worth has already been established. Right? And nothing you do or think or wish or make is necessary to establish your worth. Right? You are as God created you. Right? Your ego is never at stake because God did not create it. Well, let's go back one sentence I skipped, where he says, you don't have to do or wish or think anything. He says, this point is not debatable. Right? Your worth is established. And he goes, this point is not debatable, except in illusions. All right? Except in this illusory situation in which we find ourselves. Oh no, I'm not the Son of God. That would be arrogant for me to think that. Oh, who do you think you are? You know, all that goes on, the doubt. When you read in the Course that you are the offspring of God. You are the Son of God. You back up, you go, wait a second. If I believe that, they're going to put me away. All right? As my friend Emily, a wonderful teacher 20 years ago, would say, it's not the fact that he thought he was the Son of God that bothered me. It was the fact that he thought he was the only Son of God. All right. So we all are as one mind, we are the Son of God. All right. He says that's not debatable, except in illusions. Okay? And he says he's going to repeat these lessons over and over again. And, you know, if you're following along, you see that he's already doing that, you know? So, let's see. So this point is not debatable except in illusions. Your ego is never at stake because God did not create it. Your spirit is never at stake because he did. All right? He said you can't worry about the ego being destroyed because it's not real, is what he's saying. God didn't create it. And your spirit is not at stake. You can't lose that because God created it, because he did create it. Right? And what he created can't be destroyed. Any confusion on this point is delusional, and no form of devotion is possible as long as this delusion lasts. Right? So, we're trying to undo the delusion. All right? That's the point of the Course in Miracles. All right? The miracle, turning back to the mind to change the perception. So, paragraph 8. The ego tries to exploit all situations into forms of praise for itself in order to overcome its doubts. It will remain doubtful as long as you believe in its existence. You who made it cannot trust it because in your right mind you realize it is not real. The only sane solution is not to try to change reality, which is indeed a fearful attempt, but to accept it as it is. You are part of reality, which stands unchanged, beyond the reach of your ego, but within easy reach of spirit. When you are afraid, be still and know that God is real. And you are his beloved Son, in whom he is well pleased. Do not let your ego dispute this, because the ego cannot know what is as far beyond its reach as you are. All right. Powerful statements. All right. And these statements will be repeated. These ideas will be repeated in different words, different metaphors. All right. But he's beginning to describe the ego for us here. And he says the ego tries to exploit all situations into forms of praise for itself in order to overcome its doubts. So the ego thought system is always trying to reinforce itself. See, it's true. You see, it's true. Right? You see, it's true. This person did that. This person, that happened to him. That happened to her. You know, look at this. Look what happened to you. Right? It's true. It's true. And what's true? You're separated. You're here by yourself. You're here in this conflict, in this competing world. Competing is an easy term, putting it nicely. Okay? So the ego is always trying to overcome its doubts. All right? The ego is very insecure. Never really sure. It always knows that it knows somewhere deep down inside that there's something that can dispel it, so to speak. All right? There's a lamp that can shine the light on it. And he says, and it will remain, so an ego existence will remain insecure as long as you believe in it. But sooner or later you get that inkling there must be something else. It must be something else. All right? So the only sane solution is not to try to change reality, which is what the ego tries to do. Ego tries to change reality by trying to convince me that I am not the offspring of God. I am not an idea in the likeness of God. Right? So the ego tries to change reality. Right? So the only sane solution is not to try to change reality, which is indeed a fearful attempt. All right? But to accept it as it is. Right? That's the sane solution. To accept reality, to accept who you really are. And at times Jesus will refer to that as the atonement principle, to accept the fact that you never separated from your source. Right? You are as you were created. Right? So that's the only sane solution. You are part of reality, which stands unchanged, beyond the reach of your ego, right? But within easy reach of your spirit. All right? So we can connect with it. We can connect with it and make the awareness grow stronger, which Jesus will refer to as accepting the atonement for yourself. It's the only thing you need to do, he says. And here's this wonderful, powerful statement. That's because it's when the spirit is, the knowledge is within easy reach of spirit. Reality is within easy reach of spirit. And because of that, when you are afraid, be still and know that God is real. And you are his beloved Son, in whom he is well pleased. He says, do not let your ego dispute this, because the ego cannot know what is far beyond its reach as you are. The ego cannot know what is as far beyond its reach as you are. The ego can't know spirit. All it knows is sin, guilt, and fear, separation. All right? But he says, but you, when you realize you're afraid, just be still and realize that God is. God is. Right. Paragraph 9. God is not the author of fear. You are. All right. Now remember, he's not talking to you as Kevin. Right? Right? You as Helen. Right? You as Jackie. You as Anne. Right? Jean. Right? All my friends. Right? It's not you as the ego compilation. He's talking to you as the decision maker in your mind, that part of the mind that makes decisions. All right? So, he says, God is not the author of fear. You are. All right? You have chosen to create unlike him, and have therefore made fear for yourself. You are not at peace because you are not fulfilling your function. God gave you a very lofty function that you are not meeting. Your ego has chosen to be afraid instead of meeting it. When you awaken, you will not be able to understand this, because it is literally incredible. Do not believe the incredible now. Any attempt to increase its believableness is merely to postpone the inevitable. The word inevitable is fearful to the ego, but joyous to the spirit. The word inevitable is joyous to the spirit, and you'll see why. All right? God is inevitable, and you cannot avoid him any more than he can avoid you. All right? So God is inevitable, and there's no need to fear God. God is not angry. All right? Never. God is inevitable. So God is not the author of fear. You are, right? Not you that has become the individual, right? All my friends out there, Colleen, Barbara, and Peter, all right? Not the individual. It's the decision maker, okay? The decision maker has decided to be the author of fear. All right? And for the time being, as Dr. Wapnick would always say, it's okay to think that, there's, however many billion people walking around on the earth, running around, all with an individual decision maker. He says, it's okay, you can believe it that way, until you realize that it's all one mind, and there's one decision maker. And so I don't want to put any guilt on any of my friends who are listening to this. All right? It's the one mind, the one decision maker that Jesus is talking to. All right? Because I've had friends say, well, how could I do that? Why would I do that? And they punish them. It's not that they're punishing themselves. It's just that they're, looking at themselves like, what a loser. I've been studying this for so many years and I'm still doing this and that. Relax. And like he says, when you're afraid, be still and know that God is real. All right? And try to feel the relief in the statement that says God is inevitable. All right? the source of love and protection, right, and abundance and bliss, the source of that is inevitable. All right? And when we come back in contact with the memory of that, all right, it's just an unburdening, a relinquishment of all our trials and tribulations. And just the thought of it is such a wonderful relief. God is inevitable, and you cannot avoid him any more than he can avoid you. All right? He's not running away. All right. So, paragraph 10, page 55. The ego is afraid of the Spirit's joy, because once you have experienced it, you will withdraw all protection from the ego and become totally without investment in fear. Right? Your investment is great now because fear is a witness to the separation, and your ego rejoices when you witness to it. Leave it behind. Do not listen to it. Do not preserve it. Listen only to God, who is as incapable of deception as is the Spirit he created. Release yourself and release others. Do not present a false and unworthy picture of yourself to others, and do not accept such a picture of them yourself. He says, don't accept that picture of yourself. Right? Don't present a false and unworthy picture of yourself to others. In other words, don't present this separated individual who now, has to manipulate and maneuver and defend and get what he needs and all this. And on and on and on. Right? That present that picture of power and strength, and be seductive, and get what you want, and be endless. What we're doing is presenting a picture of a separated self. All right, just don't present that false picture, and it's unworthy of you. All right, and don't accept such a picture of them. All right, no matter how hard they try to convince me and all of us that they're separated people, which means they're fearful. And later on, Jesus will remind us, frightened people can be vicious. All right? So he says, don't accept that picture that they're presenting. All right? Now, he's not asking you to be a doormat, but in the back of your mind, you're asking Jesus, help me to see this person correctly. All right? What does the reflection of love look like in this situation where this person is presenting this false picture? This person is acting out. This person is threatening me. He's threatening all of us, maybe. All right? How do I see it correctly? All right? And you might get the idea that this person needs to be tended to somehow. They might need medication. They might need institutionalization. They might need whatever, right? They might need a desk appearance ticket. You never know. But they might need a hug. They might need love. Who knows? When I ask, help me to see this correctly, the answers arise. The answers arise. This is what I mean by you don't need to be a doormat, I mean, the society we live in, as I said once before, we need traffic lights, right? You need someone to hand out the parking tickets, right? I mean, who likes to get a parking ticket? And you just start developing a distaste for the person that hands out the parking tickets. But you got to realize, if they weren't giving out the tickets, people would be parking wherever they want. And quite soon, especially in Manhattan, within a day or two, You wouldn't be able to drive up any street because people would be parked all over the place. Because that's what the ego does. So I got to get mine. I got to get my parking spot. I'm going to park here. I don't care about you. What do I care? So in this experience, we need rules and regulations. That's all I'm trying to say. But we don't have to present a false picture of a separated entity. And we don't have to accept the picture of separated existence. Right? We don't have to accept that picture. And the way we don't accept it is by asking for this picture to be reinterpreted. Would you help me to see that correctly? Right? Like you said, start where you are. Okay. Now I've gone far afield. Okay. So do not present a false and unworthy picture of yourself to others. All right? Don't present that picture of separation to others. All right? Paragraph E11. The ego has built a shabby and unsheltering home for you because it cannot build otherwise. It can't do anything else. Do not try to make this impoverished house stand. Its weakness is your strength. Only God could make a home that is worthy of his creations, who have chosen to leave it empty by their own dispossession. Yet his home will stand forever and is ready for you when you choose to enter. Of this you can be wholly certain. God is as incapable of creating the perishable as the ego is of making the eternal. Right? So Jesus is he's giving us this introduction, so to speak, to the ego, and he's making comparisons here. All right? He's saying God can make the eternal. Right? God doesn't make the perishable. So in other words, you in spirit, you in that abstract existence are impervious to perishability. You can't perish. You exist. You last forever. Meanwhile, in this ego world, right, nothing lasts forever. Nothing. Okay? Everything deteriorates. Okay? Just leave it at that. So he says the ego has built a shabby and unsheltering home for you because it can't do anything else. It can't build the eternal. Right? So, I mean, I might take offense at Jesus telling me I'm shabby, but, all right? But the body is an unsheltering home, right? And the true home that we have is the mind, the one mind, the mind of God, all right? That exists all around us, all right? That we are part of it. And that's the home that is a good shelter, and it lasts forever. All right? Paragraph 12. Of your ego, you can do nothing to save yourself or others. But of your spirit, you can do everything for the salvation of both. All right? So this is, in spirit, you can do everything for the salvation of everyone. All right? And then he speaks about humility. And that salvation is accepting the atonement, that accepting the thought that I never left heaven. Right? And because minds are joined, everyone gets the benefit of that acceptance. Right? Which is what Jesus refers to as his resurrection. Right? When he says, you were with me when I arose. All right? That's what he means. When I accepted the truth that I am with my Father in heaven, he says, you were there. Because mind is one. Minds are joined. It's one mind. You says, you're just making stuff up, as they say. All right? And he's telling you have the ability to save everyone. And then he comes over and he says, humility is a lesson for the ego, not for the spirit. Right? Spirit is beyond humility because it recognizes its radiance and gladly sheds its light everywhere. So spirit has no need to be humble because it recognizes its likeness to God and it spreads that everywhere. It doesn't hold it off. We don't need to say, oh no, it's not me. Right? That's not me. He says, leave that, that's for your ego. That's for your ego to deny who you really are. Right? He says, the meek shall inherit the earth because their egos are humble. And this gives them truer perception. So the ego is humbled. Right? And we get truer perception. Because we realize, oh, this is who I am. This is who I am. It gives me a truer perception. The kingdom of heaven is the Spirit's right, whose beauty and dignity are far beyond doubt, right? Beyond perception, and stand forever as the mark of the love of God for his creations, who are wholly worthy of him and only of him. Nothing else is sufficiently worthy to be a gift for a creation of God himself. So in other words, the ego and all its pomps, all right, and works, all right, all its offerings, he said it's not worthy. It's not worthy of a creation of God. Okay? The kingdom of heaven is the Spirit's right. It's your right. The Spirit's right, whose beauty and dignity are far beyond doubt, beyond perception, and stand forever as the mark of the love of God for his creations. Okay? And then Jesus closes this section on the ego by saying, I will substitute for your ego if you wish, but never for your spirit. All right? A father can safely leave a child with an elder brother who has shown himself as responsible. But this involves no confusion about the child's origin. The brother can protect the child's body and his ego, but he does not confuse himself with the father because he does this. I can be entrusted with your body and your ego only because this enables you not to be concerned with them and lets me teach you their unimportance. I could not understand their importance. I could not understand their importance to you if I had not once been tempted to believe in them myself. Right? Let us undertake to learn this lesson together so we can be free of them together. I need devoted teachers who share my aim of healing the mind. Spirit is far beyond the need of your protection or mine. Remember this. In this world, you need not have tribulation, because I have overcome the world. That is why you should be of good cheer. All right? Jesus says, look, I can substitute for your ego if you wish. And he says that in other places by saying, let me guide your thoughts. All right? It's like, put me in charge of your thinking. All right? Ken's wife, Gloria Wapnick, used to say, allow yourself to be thunk. All right? Which is equivalent to my wonderful wife Jean's metaphor of being in the flow. She says, sometimes I feel like I'm in the flow, and that's what it is. Right? You're being thunk, you're being guided. And Jesus says, I will substitute for your ego if you wish, but never for your spirit, because we're the same in spirit. I don't have to substitute for your spirit. All right? He says, I can be entrusted with your body and your ego only because this enables you not to be concerned with them. All right? So that's what it is. So concerned with the body and with my ego, my personality, my what did he think about me? What is this? What's going to happen? Everything in this ego world. He goes, I can help you with that. I can be entrusted with that. In other words, I can ask him, help me to see this correctly. Help me to see this body condition correctly. Help me to see my financial situation correctly. Help me to see this governmental situation correctly. All right? Help me to see everything correctly. All right? Everything. He says, I can be entrusted with everything because this enables you not to be concerned with them. In other words, I don't have to figure stuff out. I can be guided. All right? I don't have to come up with solutions. All right? As Ken would say, Dr. Wapnick would say, come up with maladaptive solutions to non-existent problems. He always loved that saying, right? The ego comes up with maladaptive solutions to non-existent problems. All right? They're perceived problems, and we learn. All right? It's not saying to dismiss any situations you have, just ultimately we will come to learn. As Jesus says here, I can be entrusted with your body and your ego only because this enables you not to be concerned with them, and it lets me teach you their unimportance. All right? So it lets me teach you that these are maladaptive solutions to non-existent problems. All right? I'll teach you of their unimportance. All right? And he says, look, I could not understand their importance to you. He says, I get it. I understand it's important to you. So let me help you with these things. And he says, and I understand it. I get it. Because I was once tempted to believe in the ego myself. I was once tempted to believe in all these ego situations. Right? So he says, together, let us undertake to learn this lesson together, so that we can be free of them together. All right? He says, I need devoted teachers who share my aim of healing the mind. All right? So Jesus needs us to help him in his aim to heal the mind. The mind is split, and the healing is bringing it back to one. All right? Eliminating the ego thought system. Letting it go, letting it disappear, drift away, right? And choosing the right mind. And in that choice, the split is healed, right? And he says, that's my goal, right? I need devoted teachers who share my aim of healing the mind, right? He says, spirit is far beyond the need of your protection or mine. You don't need to protect spirit. It lasts forever, and it's very safe, always. All right? Spirit is far beyond the need of your protection or mine. He says, remember this. In this world, you need not have tribulation. All right? He says, you don't need tribulation because I have overcome the world. That is why you should be of good cheer. Be of good cheer. I'm here to help you. I've been through what you're going through, and I have overcome it. Right? Take my hand, walk with me, invite me in, have a discussion with me, ask me questions. He says, I'm here to help you because I've overcome the world. Right? The entire world Doesn't bother me, doesn't scare me. This is what Jesus is saying. And he goes, so I'm here to help you, and this is why you should be of good cheer. All right. So that's the end of the first section in the Illusions of the Ego, chapter 4. All right, that first section. The end of right teaching and right learning. All right. So be of good cheer. All right, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.